I'm Evan Thompson, Executive Director of Preservation Texas, and today we are announcing the 2022 list of Most Endangered Places. Preservation Texas is the only statewide, member-supported nonprofit historic preservation organization in Texas. Since 2004, we have released an annual list of the most endangered historic places in Texas. Sites are nominated by Preservation Texas members, and the final list is approved by our volunteer board of directors. Each year, the list reflects the diversity of historic resources in our state and the threats that historic places are facing. Each site represents a chance to reinvest in our historic communities to ensure that irreplaceable landmarks can continue to contribute to the richness of our culture and to the economic vitality of our state. Of the more than 150 individual sites that have been included on our list over the last 18 years, only 14, or 9%, have been lost. But so many more have been saved and given a second chance to contribute to the cultural and economic life of the communities in which they stand. Every preservation effort, whether it be Mount Vernon on the Potomac River in Virginia or ZEDLER'S Mill on the San Marcos River in Luling, Texas, begins with one person who asks what can be done and begins to do it. Building coalitions, building awareness, are the building blocks for saving a historic place. This is a call to action to save Texas's most endangered places. For centuries, the Texas coast has been Texas's front door, an entry point for people settling, trading, and touring. Since 1872, the Bolivar Point Lighthouse has been a coastal beacon to those at sea and even served as a place of shelter during the ferocious 1900 Galveston hurricane. It's one of a handful of 19th century lighthouses that survive on the Gulf Coast, and one of only 2 iron lighthouses that still stand in Texas. Privately owned, the National Register listed lighthouse's restoration will be guided by the Bolivar Point Lighthouse Foundation. The foundation is raising the funds needed to restore the lighthouse and open it to the public. Greater awareness of this important landmark will build momentum and enthusiasm for its preservation so that our state's maritime history can be shared and appreciated by all who visit in the future. As Texas grew through the 19th century, the state's increasingly urban, middle-class population sought opportunities to escape the confines of their cities for relaxing vacations. The development of Palacios as a coastal resort took advantage of this newfound desire and opportunity for leisure, drawing thousands of visitors annually from Houston and beyond. Built in 1903 and expanded in 1905, the Luther Hotel was the anchor for Palacios's coastal tourism and remains the architectural heart of the community today. But years of neglect have left the building in need of major preservation investments that would boost Palacios's economy and leverage preservation tax incentives. A pending sales contract for the hotel's waterfront site has been made contingent on the building's demolition, but local residents have formed the Palacios Preservation Committee and are leading a final effort to save the structure that defines the essence of Palacios. The historic hill country community of Luckenbach has been a tourism draw of a different sort over the last 50 years. Originally settled in the late 1840s, its population peaked in 1904 with around 500 residents. In the 1970s, visionary investors acquired much of the town, including its dance hall and general store, and transformed it into a legendary country music destination. Jerry Jeff Walker, Waylon Jennings, Willie Nelson, and scores of other nationally known musicians have celebrated Luckenbach as part of their own musical legacy. But the encroachment of development in the fast-growing hill country threatens Luckenbach's unique sense of place. A comprehensive cultural landscape inventory of the historic community can provide a critically needed roadmap for the protection and preservation of historic Luckenbach so that its authentic character can be secured for generations to come. It's impossible to talk about country music in Texas without appreciating the nationally significant contributions of Texas-born Cindy Walker. The Country Music Hall of Fame songwriter, who died in 2006, lived for over 50 years in this house in rural Mexia. Here she wrote nationally loved songs such as You Don't Know Me, which has been recorded by over 200 artists, including Elvis and Ray Charles, and Dream Baby for Roy Orbison, among scores of other top hits. The recently formed Cindy Walker Foundation has purchased her neglected home and has begun planning for its restoration as both a museum and as a home for a songwriter-in-residence program. Research and documentation leading to a National Register nomination will make the property eligible for historic tax credits, and once restored, the Cindy Walker House will become a new destination for country music fans from all over Texas and beyond. Just up the road from the Cindy Walker House is the historic hilltop community of Tawakona, with an ancient history connected to its famous springs. It was here in 1869 where Trinity University was founded by Cumberland Presbyterians, later moving in 1902, after which the campus became home to Westminster College until 1972. The site is now privately owned, and the surviving structures and archaeological resources merit preservation and interpretation. While many resources have been lost, important buildings and features remain, including the massive Texas Hall, which suffered a devastating blow with the recent collapse of its roof. Documentation of the historic resources of Tawakona, fundraising for the restoration of Texas Hall, and a long-term plan for the sustainable preservation of other campus buildings, including its 1930s gymnasium, will ensure that Tawakona's architectural and educational legacy survives. Though recently designated a National Register Historic District, Fort Worth's 1939 WPA-funded Farrington Field and 1953 Billingsley Fieldhouse are being considered for redevelopment by the Fort Worth Independent School District, putting the future of these structures at risk. Local advocates are raising awareness of the importance of these places, which remain in use and are beloved by generations of Fort Worth students and sports fans alike. The properties are in need of significant preservation investments and are prominently located in an area of high property values, placing pressure on this significant site. However, historic tax credits could be leveraged by private owners, worth up to $15 million if these important landmarks were to be saved and incorporated into a new use for the site. We join local advocates in encouraging the preservation of this important Fort Worth landmark and remind Texans that just because a site is listed on the National Register, it is not automatically protected from demolition. Another North Central Texas landmark of a different kind sits idle just east of downtown Abilene. The 1922 West Texas Utilities Power Plant, designed by Dallas architect Wyatt C. Hedrick, was an innovative industrial space for its time that incorporated plentiful natural light. The plant was one of 6 of its kind built in Texas in the early 20th century and powered regional electricity needs until the 1960s. Listed on the National Register, redevelopment of the site by a new owner could leverage historic tax credits. A feasibility study for its adaptive use can be inspired by many similar examples of the conversion of major industrial sites into vibrant new uses, such as Austin's Seaholm Power Plant and the Comal Power Plant in New Braunfels. The West Texas Utilities Power Plant is poised to contribute greatly to the continued renaissance of downtown Abilene. Equally significant, but almost invisible, is the 1853 BOWIE-WATSON house in Austin, tucked away near the Dell Medical School on the University of Texas campus, on a bluff overlooking Waller Creek. Constructed for the widow of the inventor of the Bowie knife, it is a rare surviving pre-Civil War house in central Austin. It has been owned by a number of prominent people and families, its last owner being an important preservationist and interior designer, Arthur Pope Watson, who purchased the home in 1959 and shared it with his partner, Robert Wayne Garrett. The house played a significant role in the social life of Austin's LGBT community for several decades, even after it was acquired by the university through eminent domain in the late 1960s. The BOWIE-WATSON house is ideally sited and suited to serve as a university venue for special events, fundraisers, even lodging for distinguished visitors, but it has suffered from years of demolition by neglect. As the oldest structure on UT's campus, its restoration can reinforce the university's long and historic ties to the city, while teaching the importance of preservation to its students and the protection of LGBT landmarks in our state. Not every Texan has always had a fair chance at an education. Until 1948, Mexican-American public school students could be legally segregated on separate campuses. The buildings used as Mexican schools were often poorly maintained, with minimal space for recreation, libraries, and other essential functions. With the closure of many of these schools in the mid-20th century, the physical legacy of Mexican-American public education in the late 19th and early 20th centuries has slowly disappeared. The recent designation of one of the rare surviving structures, the Blackwell School in Marfa, as a National Historic Site is inspiring a new effort to identify and document the fate of these important places. All across Texas, from Marathon to Bastrop, surviving buildings and the sites where these schools once stood can continue to serve as places to remember the struggles and challenges Texans have faced to secure equal opportunities for education. For nearly a century, until the 1950s, commercial advertisements were commonly painted on the sides and corners of downtown buildings throughout Texas communities, large and small. Ghost signs are the faded remains of these old wall signs, heralding long-forgotten products or businesses that were hand-painted by groups of sign painters known as wall dogs. If a ghost sign is not maintained or restored, it will disappear over time. But the case has been made that protecting existing ghost signs can support downtown revitalization efforts, supporting heritage tourism, and reinforcing a unique sense of place that is rooted in a community's history. By working with Main Street communities, art conservators, and other key stakeholders, we can develop and share best practices, identify and catalog surviving ghost signs, and start a dialogue about how they might be preserved and interpreted. First popularized on the east coast of the United States in the mid-19th century, the Carpenter Gothic architectural style is best represented in Texas by the surviving timber-frame churches across our state. Distinguished by their wood siding, pointed arched windows, and often elaborate detailing around doorways, gables, and steeples, they are commonly found in communities with dwindling populations, changing demographics, and shrinking congregations. Carpenter Gothic churches require regular maintenance to ensure that their characteristic features are preserved. Deferred maintenance often leads to leaking roofs, deteriorating windows, and even structural failure, while insensitive restoration using vinyl siding, plastic windows, and non-historic roofing materials obscure original detail and destroy their historic character. Congregations are in need of preservation stewardship training and resources that will allow them to develop cyclical maintenance plans and long-term goals for preservation, which can leverage state historic tax credits. Greater education about the unique character of Carpenter Gothic architecture will also increase public support for their preservation so that they can continue to serve as community anchors and important resources for rural and small town heritage tourism development. In 1834, Mark Epperson moved to sparsely settled northeast Mexican Texas, settling on the Sulphur Fork of the Red River, an important Caddo Indian site, where he built the first ferry between the Arkansas Territory and Big Cypress along Trammel's Trace. In 1836, the Republic of Texas established its first mail route, making Epperson's Ferry a regional hub for postal services, news, and commerce for 4 decades. The site today is a short distance upriver from Wright-Patman Lake, and the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers plans to raise the level of the lake 6 to 7 feet to meet the water consumption needs of the Dallas Metroplex. The rise in the water will submerge important archaeological resources that have been inadequately studied and diminish, if not destroy, opportunities for understanding this important historic site, one of hundreds of other threatened archaeological sites around the lake. Preservation Texas will engage with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers as a consulting party under the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966 to ensure that the threat to the Epperson's Ferry site and other archaeological resources are mitigated, while spotlighting the importance of the long-forgotten cultural resources associated with historic Trammel's Trace throughout Northeast Texas. In the years following emancipation in 1865, hundreds of freedom colonies were founded by black men and women across Texas. Most freedom colony families engaged in farming, and soon each community organized churches, schools, and fraternal lodges. The buildings they constructed to house these institutions are important landmarks and are often the only remaining vestiges of these vanishing communities. Demographic changes caused by late 19th century rural domestic terrorism and migration to urban areas for new economic opportunities throughout the 20th century led to the collapse of most rural freedom colonies. Preservation Texas has secured $750,000 from the National Park Service to provide grants to 11 sites through our new Texas Rural African American Heritage Grants program, along with $25,000 in planning grants from the National Trust for Historic Preservation's Fondren Fund for Texas, and with the hiring of a new endangered properties manager in January supported by the Dealey Family Foundation and Summerleaf Foundation, we will work with the stewards of these 11 structures to ensure their preservation projects are a success, listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and protected with preservation easements. We look forward to announcing the full list of 11 grant recipients in another video 1 week from today. Historic preservation is about protecting places of architectural, historical, and cultural significance through the management of change. No, we can't save everything, but so much has already been lost, and these are places that must be preserved in a changing world. The sites on this year's list of Most Endangered Places join a growing list that began in 2004, all of which merit the investment of time and resources necessary to save them. In the months and years ahead, progress will be made, and we look forward to a future where each one of these sites is protected, productive, and restored to its proper place as tangible reminders of our irreplaceable Texas heritage.